The arrival. In the cold, endless expanse of space, the celestial dawn glided through the stars, its gleaming hull reflecting the light of distant suns. Inside the ship, Ethan Graves felt a mix of anticipation and dread. After years of serving as a soldier, he had transitioned into a role that felt foreign yet exhilarating: security consultant for a high-stakes auction. Dressed in a crisp white uniform that felt almost ceremonial, he adjusted to the unfamiliar fabric against his skin. His military fatigues had long since become second nature, but now they were replaced by this sterile outfit that spoke of elegance and privilege. As he stepped onto the gangway, Ethan's eyes scanned the bustling docking bay. Creatures of every conceivable shape and color moved about, their chatter a symphony of clicks, whistles, and guttural sounds that filled the air with an otherworldly hum. The scent of exotic perfumes and alien pheromones mingled with the acrid tang of starship fuel, creating a sensory overload that heightened his senses. A towering blue-skinned Andorian blocked his path, its mandibles clicking with irritation. "Credentials," it demanded, its voice gravelly and imposing. Ethan produced his forged ident chip with a practiced flick of his wrist, his heart racing as the Andorian scrutinized it. "Ethan Graves, security consultant. I'm here at the request of Lord Slur," he stated, maintaining an air of confidence despite the unease gnawing at his gut. After what felt like an eternity, the Andorian grunted and waved him through. As he entered the ship proper, Ethan's tension began to ebb. The utilitarian corridors of the docking area transformed into sumptuous hallways adorned with shimmering fabrics and holographic art pieces that seemed to dance in rhythm with his footsteps. The atmosphere shifted as he navigated deeper into the celestial dawn. Ethan's mission was clear: gather intel on the notorious arms dealer, Thor, who was rumored to be attending this exclusive auction. Though the details of what was being sold remained unclear, Ethan knew better than to trust appearances. With a clientele like this, it was unlikely that anything legal was being traded. A melodic chime echoed through the ship, drawing him towards the grand atrium. A holographic display materialized, welcoming esteemed guests with a silky voice. "The pre-auction reception will commence in 30 standard minutes. We hope you'll join us for refreshments and a preview of our exceptional merchandise." Ethan's jaw clenched. He needed to find Thor, gather intel, and get out. Simple, right? But as he made his way toward the atrium, an unsettling feeling prickled at the back of his mind. Something about this setup felt wrong. The grand atrium was magnificent, a vast circular chamber crowned with a dome that displayed a dazzling array of stars and nebulae, creating the illusion of standing amidst the cosmos. Aliens of every description mingled, sipping vibrant cocktails and sampling exotic delicacies served on floating platters. Ethan snagged a flute of sparkling green liquid, keeping his eyes peeled for Thor's distinctive crimson scales. As he scanned the crowd, a husky voice interrupted his thoughts. First time at one of these little soirees. Ethan turned to find a statuesque humanoid female standing before him. Her deep violet skin was interlaced with swirling patterns of bioluminescence that pulsed softly. 4 obsidian eyes regarded him with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "That obvious, huh?" Ethan replied, forcing a self-deprecating chuckle. The alien's lips curled into a knowing smile. "I'm Zara, and you are?" Ethan Graves, security consultant. Zara's luminous patterns pulsed with interest. "I wouldn't have pegged you for the bodyguard type. You seem more complex than that." Ethan felt his pulse quicken at the implication behind her words. Was his cover already blown? He took a casual sip of his drink, buying time to formulate a response. "I like to think I have hidden depths," he said with a wink. Zara laughed, a sound like tinkling crystals. "Don't we all, darling? Tell me, what brings a security consultant to our little gathering? Surely you're not here to bid." Before Ethan could answer, a hush fell over the room. A holographic stage materialized at the center of the atrium, and a serpentine creature with shimmering, oily scales and a mane of feathers stepped into view. its voice amplified to fill the chamber. "Honored guests, I am Skith, your humble auctioneer for this evening's proceedings. We have procured some truly exquisite merchandise for your pleasure and perusal." Ethan's blood ran cold as 3 shimmering force fields appeared on stage, each containing a female figure. The beings were humanoid, their blue skin luminous under the harsh lights, with delicate features and flowing hair that seemed to float as if underwater. "Behold," Skith continued, 3 prime specimens of the elusive Oran race, renowned throughout the galaxy for their beauty, grace, and shall we say, talents in the art of pleasure. The audience murmured appreciatively, many leaning forward with predatory interest. Disgust churned in Ethan's gut as he realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't an arms deal, it was a slave auction. "The bidding will commence in 1 standard hour," Skith announced. "Until then, please enjoy our hospitality and perhaps consider which of these lovely creatures you might like to take home." As the hologram faded, the gathered aliens surged forward, eager to gawk at the captives. Not interested in the merchandise, Zara's voice pulled Ethan from his dark thoughts. Ethan clenched his jaw. "I'm here on business, not pleasure." Zara's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what could only be described as skepticism. A pity. "The Oran truly are remarkable creatures. I had one once, you know, so eager to please." It took every ounce of Ethan's self-control not to recoil at her words. He forced a non-committal grunt, scanning the room for potential allies or escape routes. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check in with my employer." "Of course," Zara said, her multiple eyes narrowing slightly. "Do enjoy the party, Ethan Graves. I suspect it will be a night to remember." As Ethan wove through the crowd, snippets of conversation assaulted his ears. "Heard they can interface directly with your nervous system. Breeding stock, if you can afford the setup cost. Always wanted to dissect one, see what makes them tick." He needed air, he needed to think. Slipping out of the atrium, he found himself in a deserted corridor, leaning against the wall as he tried to steady his breathing. "Hey, you're not supposed to be back here." Ethan turned to see a burly Soren glaring at him, its hand hovering near a nasty-looking shock baton. "Sorry," Ethan said, raising his hands placatingly. Got turned around looking for the refresher. These ships all look the same to me. The Soren's reptilian eyes narrowed. "ID now." Ethan produced his forged credentials again, praying they would hold up. The guard examined them with agonizing slowness before grunting and jerking a clawed thumb over his shoulder. "Refreshers are that way. Don't let me catch you wandering again." Heart-pounding, Ethan nodded and strode in the indicated direction. As soon as he rounded the corner, he broke into a run. He needed to find the holding cells, needed to see those captive women up close. Maybe there was a way to. He skidded to a halt, nearly colliding with a shimmering force field. Beyond it lay a sterile corridor lined with transparent cells. In the nearest one, his breath caught as he beheld one of the Oran women. She stood mere inches away, her luminous skin glowing with an ethereal light. "Hey," he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Can you understand me?" The woman tilted her head, regarding him with curiosity. "I comprehend your language, yes, though I do not understand why you address me as an equal." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "You are clearly not one of the worthy ones," she replied, her voice like music. "Yet you speak to me directly rather than issuing commands. It is puzzling." "The worthy ones," Ethan repeated. "You mean the buyers?" The Oran nodded. "Those of sufficient status to own one such as myself. It is a great honor to be chosen." Ethan's stomach churned. "You can't really believe that. You're not property." Confusion flickered across her delicate features. "I do not understand. We exist to bring pleasure and companionship to the worthy ones. It is our purpose." "Like hell it is," Ethan growled, his heart racing as he glanced at the control panel beside the force field. If he could just bypass the security protocols. "Step away from the merchandise." Ethan froze, cursing inwardly. He turned slowly to find himself face to face with Skith, flanked by two hulking guards. Ethan Graves, was it? Skith hissed, forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. I don't recall authorizing a private viewing for you. Ethan's mind raced, searching for a plausible excuse. My apologies. I was simply conducting a routine security sweep for my employer. Can't be too careful with merchandise is valuable. Skith's slitted eyes narrowed. Indeed, and who might your employer be? That would be me. A new voice joined the fray, smooth as silk and cold as ice. Ethan turned to see a towering figure approach, his crimson scales gleaming under the harsh light. Drathor, Ethan thought, recognition flooding his senses. This was the very arms dealer he had come here to gather intel on. Lord Drathor, Skith hissed, bowing low. I was unaware you had hired additional security. The arms dealer's lips curled into a razor-sharp smile. A recent acquisition. One can never be too cautious in our line of work, wouldn't you agree? Ethan fought to keep his expression neutral as Drathor's clawed hand came to rest heavily on his shoulder. I do hope my overzealous employee hasn't caused any trouble. No trouble at all, my lord, Skith replied, his feathered crest rising and falling. Though perhaps a reminder about proper protocols would not go amiss. Of course, Drathor purred, leading Ethan away. Come, Graves. We have much to discuss before the bidding begins. As they walked away, Ethan risked a glance back at the Oran woman. Her silver eyes met his, a flicker of something passing between them. Understanding, hope. He would find a way to free her, to free all of them, no matter the cost. Drathor's grip tightened painfully on Ethan's shoulder as they rounded a corner, out of sight of the guards. In one fluid motion, the arms dealer slammed Ethan against the wall, razor-sharp claws pricking the skin of his throat. Now then, Drathor growled, his yellow eyes blazing. Let's dispense with the charade, shall we? Who are you really, and who sent you? Ethan's mind raced, adrenaline surging through his veins. He needed to salvage this, to maintain his cover somehow. I told you, he choked out. Ethan Graves, security consultant. I was hired to. The pressure on his throat increased, cutting off his words. Lie to me again, and I'll have your tongue as a souvenir, Drathor hissed. You're no mere security guard. Military training, if I had to guess. So I'll ask once more, who sent you? Ethan's hand inched towards the hidden compartment where his blaster lay concealed. If he could just reach it. A low chuckle rumbled from Drathor's chest. Go ahead, he taunted. Draw your weapon. Give me an excuse to end you right here. Their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Ethan's fingers brushed the cool metal of his blaster, every muscle coiled and ready to strike. Suddenly, the shipwide chime of an announcement shattered the tense moment. Attention esteemed guests. The auction will commence in 15 standard minutes. Please make your way to the grand atrium. Drathor's grip loosened slightly, though his claws remained threateningly close to Ethan's jugular. It seems we're at an impasse, he mused. Kill you now and risk drawing unwanted attention, or let you live and deal with whatever pitiful scheme you're hatching. Ethan forced a cocky grin, despite the fear coursing through him. Third option, you let me go. We both attend this lovely slave auction, and we can kill each other later, after the party. To Ethan's surprise, Drathor threw back his head and laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Oh, I do like you, he said finally, releasing his hold. Very well, Ethan Graves. We'll play this game a while longer. But know this, I'll be watching your every move. One misstep, one hint of treachery, and I'll have your innards decorating my quarters before you can blink. With a final threatening smile, Drathor turned and strode toward the atrium. Ethan sagged against the wall, his heart hammering. He bought himself some time, but his situation had just become infinitely more complicated. As he made his way back to the crowded atrium, Ethan's mind whirled. He needed to find a way to free the Oran women, gather intel on Drathor's operations, and somehow make it off this ship alive. all while under the constant scrutiny of a homicidal arms dealer. Just another day at the office for a former Spec Ops soldier. The grand atrium had transformed in his absence. The holographic ceiling now displayed a swirling vortex of credits and precious gems, while the central stage had expanded to showcase a dozen shimmering force fields. Within each stood an alien being, some humanoid, others decidedly not, all with the same haunted look in their eyes. Ethan's gaze was drawn to the three Oran women he'd seen earlier. They stood with regal bearing, their luminous skin seeming to pulse with an inner light. But now that he knew what to look for, he could see the tension in their postures, the barely concealed fear. He shouldered his way through the crowd, searching for a vantage point that would give him a clear view of both the stage and the exits. As he moved, snippets of conversation assaulted his ears. How the Oran can synchronize with your brainwaves and anticipate your every desire. His resolve hardened. He would find a way to end this, no matter the cost. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as Skith slithered onto the stage, his oily scales shimmering under the harsh lights. "Honored guests," he hissed, his voice amplified to fill the cavernous space. "The moment you've all been waiting for has arrived. Let the bidding commence." What followed was a grotesque parody of the high-stakes auctions Ethan had seen in videos. Alien beings were paraded before the crowd, their attributes extolled as if they were prized livestock. Bids were placed, fortunes changing hands for the privilege of owning another sentient being. Through it all, Ethan's eyes darted between the exits, the stage, and the looming presence of Drathor. The arms dealer stood at the front, his yellow eyes gleaming with a predatory glint as each new item was presented. Finally, the moment Ethan had been dreading arrived. Skith's voice rose with excitement as he announced, "And now, the crown jewels of our collection, 3 prime specimens of the elusive Oran race." The force fields containing the blue-skinned women glided to the center of the stage, their skin shimmering and drawing gasps of admiration from the crowd. "We'll start the bidding at 1 million credits," Skith declared. Immediately, hands and other appendages shot up, and the price soared higher and higher as the aliens worked themselves into a frenzy. Ethan's stomach turned as he watched. 5 million credits. A booming voice cut through the crowd. Ethan's blood ran cold as he recognized the speaker, Drathor, stepping forward with a victorious smirk. 5 million from the esteemed Lord Drathor. "Do I hear 5 million?" Skith exclaimed, excitement radiating from his every scale. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let this happen, but what could he do? He was outnumbered, and his cover was fragile at best. His eyes met those of the central Oran woman. In that moment, something passed between them, recognition, shared understanding. Despite her alien nature, she gave a slight nod as if to say, "I trust you." That silent exchange strengthened Ethan's resolve. Slowly, he edged toward the stage, his hand moving toward his concealed blaster. He had no real plan, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stand by and watch these women be sold like property. "Sold to Lord Drathor for 15 million credits," Skith announced, the crowd erupting into applause. Drathor strode toward the force fields, a victorious smirk on his face, but then suspicion replaced triumph in his gaze as he caught Ethan's eye. Ethan knew his time had run out. It was now or never. With practiced speed, he drew his blaster and fired into the ceiling. The holographic display shattered in a burst of sparks, plunging the room into chaos. Aliens panicked, scattering in all directions. Ethan leaped onto the stage, slamming his fist into the control panel, praying his basic knowledge of the ship's systems would be enough. To his relief, the force fields flickered and died. The Oran women hesitated for a moment, stunned. "Come on," Ethan shouted, grabbing the nearest woman's hand. "We have to move." That snapped them into action. The women moved with surprising grace, easily keeping up with Ethan as they dashed toward the nearest exit. Angry shouts and the whine of energy weapons echoed behind them. Ethan glanced back to see Thor chasing them, his face twisted in fury. "Stop them," he roared. 1,000,000 credits to anyone who brings me their heads. Ethan's heart pounded as they raced through the opulent corridors of the Celestial Dawn. He didn't know where they were going. He had no plan beyond getting away. But as he ran, still holding the Auran woman's hand, he felt a strange, fierce joy. He might die here, probably would, but at least he was doing something that mattered. They skidded around a corner, barely avoiding a group of stunned alien guests as they fled. Ethan glanced at the woman next to him. Despite the danger, despite everything, there was a spark in her silver eyes, hope, freedom, and maybe something more. "I'm Ethan," he said between heavy breaths. "Allie," she replied, her voice steady even as they fled. "Thank you, Ethan of Earth. Whatever happens, you've given us a chance at real life." Ethan squeezed her hand tighter as the sounds of pursuit grew louder. They would figure out the rest later. For now, it was a race to stay ahead, to find an escape, and to protect the bond that was forming between this human soldier and the alien women he'd risked everything to save. They found themselves cornered in a maintenance bay. The hiss of a closing blast door echoed behind them, holding their pursuers off for the moment, but they knew it was only a matter of time. Ethan frantically scanned the room for something, anything, that could help them escape. His eyes landed on a row of sleek, one-person escape pods. "There," he shouted, pointing. "It's a long shot, but it might be our only chance." They rushed toward the pods as alarms blared throughout the ship. The door behind them began to glow red as their pursuers started cutting through. Ethan quickly helped the Auran women into the tight pods, his heart racing. Allie was the last to enter, but she paused at the threshold, worry filling her eyes. "What about you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan hesitated, knowing that leaving her behind was not an option. "I'll find another way," he promised, forcing a smile despite the dread swirling in his chest. "No," Allie protested, stepping closer. "You can't. We don't have time," Ethan urged, glancing over his shoulder at the sound of footsteps drawing closer. With one last look, Allie nodded, climbing into the pod. "Good luck," she whispered, and with that, Ethan sealed the pod, the mechanism locking with a decisive click. He turned to face the approaching guards, determination hardening in his chest. No matter what it took, he would find a way to save them all. The escape. As the escape pod's door hissed shut, sealing Allie within, Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through him. He had managed to protect her, but now he was left behind in a rapidly deteriorating situation. The sounds of chaos echoed around him, punctuated by the whir of machinery and the frantic shouts of guards. Time was running out, and he had to act quickly. Ethan sprinted down the maintenance bay, scanning for any possible escape routes. The flickering lights overhead cast airy shadows on the walls, making the corridor ahead seem both inviting and menacing. He could hear the voices of the guards growing louder, their reptilian shouts filled with anger and the promise of violence. His mind raced, calculating the risks and the options. "Think, Graves," he muttered to himself, forcing his mind to focus. The Celestial Dawn was a massive ship, and while he had only been on it for a short time, he had studied its layout during his preparations. There had to be maintenance access tunnels or emergency exits nearby. Turning a corner, Ethan spotted a utility closet. He dashed inside and quickly scanned the shelves, his heart pounding. Tools, spare parts, and various pieces of equipment littered the space, but he needed something useful. His eyes landed on a maintenance uniform hanging on a hook. He snatched it, quickly changing out of his crisp white uniform and into the drab coveralls. They would help him blend in if he could find a way to get past the guards. Draped in the new attire, Ethan adjusted the cap to hide his features and took a deep breath. The sounds of the guards echoed closer, and he needed to move. He slipped out of the utility closet and back into the corridor, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. With each step, Ethan reminded himself of his purpose. He had come to this auction to gather intel on Thor, but now he had a more pressing mission: to rescue Ailey and the other Oran women. They deserved freedom, not the life of servitude that was being forced upon them. As he crept through the dimly lit corridors, he could hear snippets of conversations between the guards. "Did you see them? The bounty is huge for those Oran women," one guard exclaimed. "The boss is furious. We can't let them escape," another replied. Ethan's stomach twisted at the thought of Thor's fury. He had to find a way to regroup with Allie, get her to safety, and then figure out how to bring down the arms dealer once and for all. He rounded a corner and paused at a window that overlooked the atrium. His heart sank at the scene below. The auction had descended into chaos. Guests were fleeing, and a few guards were trying to restore order. In the center of the atrium stood Thor, his crimson scales gleaming with rage as he barked orders at his men. Ethan could see the force fields flickering above the Oran women, still trapped, and his resolve hardened. "Not on my watch," he whispered to himself, determination flooding his veins. Ethan needed to find a way to disable the security systems that protected the Oran women. If he could manage that, he could create a diversion to draw Thor's attention away while the women escaped. He scanned the area for a control panel. There, he thought, spotting a panel on the wall nearby, just outside the atrium. If he could get close enough to access it, he might be able to shut down the force fields. He glanced around to ensure the coast was clear before slipping out of the shadows. As he made his way toward the control panel, a guard suddenly rounded the corner, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Ethan. "Hey, you," the guard shouted, raising his weapon. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast that scorched the wall where he had just been standing. Rolling to his feet, he sprinted towards the control panel. Adrenaline surged through him as he reached for the interface. The panel was surprisingly complex, filled with buttons and holographic displays. Ethan's training kicked in as he tried to remember the basics of ship operations. He spotted the button that controlled the force fields and pressed it, praying it would work. A series of alarms blared, and the lights began to flicker ominously. "What the hell?" the guard yelled, rushing toward Ethan, but Ethan was already on the move. He ducked behind the panel, knowing he needed to keep his presence a secret for just a moment longer. As the guard approached, Ethan peered out from his hiding spot. The guard seemed distracted by the alarm and was fumbling with his communicator. "We've got a breach. The Oran women, someone's trying to disable the security systems." With the distraction in place, Ethan took a deep breath and charged forward, tackling the guard to the ground. The man grunted in surprise as they hit the floor, but Ethan quickly overpowered him, pinning him down. "I'm sorry about this," he muttered, his voice low. With a swift motion, he knocked the guard out cold, then grabbed his communicator and weapon. Heart racing, Ethan sprinted back to the atrium, the alarm still ringing in his ears. He burst through the doors, scanning a room for Ailey and the Oran women. The chaos around him was like a storm, but he kept his focus. "Ethan!" Ellie's voice rang out, and he turned to see her staring at him through the crowd. She had managed to slip out of her pod and was standing near the edge of the stage, looking frantic. "There," Ethan shouted, pointing toward her. "I'm coming." As he rushed through the throng, he caught sight of Thor, his eyes wild with rage. "Find that human," he bellowed, and Ethan's heart sank. He could feel the intensity of Thor's gaze boring into him. With a surge of determination, Ethan pushed through the crowd, dodging alien bodies as he made his way to Allie. "We have to get out of here," he urged, grabbing her hand. Before they could move, the guards began to surround them. Ethan raised his weapon, ready to fight. "I won't let them take you," he shouted. "Ethan, look out," Allie cried as a guard lunged for them, weapon drawn. With reflexes honed from years of combat, Ethan fired a shot at the ground near the guard's feet, sending him stumbling back. "Go," he yelled at Allie, pushing her toward a side exit. They dashed through the chaos, adrenaline fueling their escape. Ethan could feel the heat of the blaster fire behind them, the air crackling with tension as the guards shouted for reinforcements. Just ahead, a door labeled Emergency Exit loomed. Ethan grabbed the handle and yanked it open, pulling Ellie inside just as blaster fire ricocheted off the walls behind them. The door slammed shut, isolating them in the darkened corridor beyond. Breathless, they leaned against the door, hearts pounding. "Did we lose them?" Ellie asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. "For now," Ethan replied, glancing down the narrow hallway. "But we need to move quickly. There's bound to be more guards nearby." Ellie nodded, determination replacing her earlier fear. "Where do we go?" Ethan took a moment to collect his thoughts. "We need to find the ship's main control room. If I can access the ship's systems, I can override security and help the others escape." "Then let's go," Ellie said, her eyes shining with resolve. They moved cautiously down the corridor, sticking to the shadows. Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of Drathor and the auction. The horrors he had witnessed haunted him, but now he was focused on rescuing the Oran women and stopping the arms dealer from continuing his vile trade. As they navigated the ship, the sounds of pursuit faded into the background, replaced by the low hum of machinery. They passed through maintenance rooms and cargo holds, trying to remain undetected. Finally, they reached a large door marked Control Room. Ethan pressed his ear against it, listening for any signs of life. Hearing nothing, he turned the handle and pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with screens and control panels. He stepped inside, quickly assessing the situation. "Okay, stay close to me," he instructed Ellie as he moved to the main console. Ethan's fingers flew over the buttons and switches as he accessed the ship's systems. He could see the layouts of the ship, the locations of the guards, and the force fields that still held the other Oran women captive. "There they are," he said, pointing to the screen that showed the auction stage. "They're still trapped. I need to shut down the force fields." "Can you do it?" Ellie asked, glancing nervously at the door. "Just give me a second," Ethan replied, focusing on the controls. His heart raced as he tried to override the security protocols. Come on, come on." Suddenly, the screen flashed red, and an alarm blared. "Unauthorized access detected. Lockdown initiated." "Ethan," Ellie shouted, panic rising in her voice. "Just hold on," he replied, typing furiously. "I can bypass this." He located the override command and pressed it, his breath catching in his throat as the screen flickered. "Yes," he explained as the alarms ceased and the force fields blinked out of existence. "Ethan, you did it," Ellie said, relief flooding her expression. "Now let's get the others," Ethan urged, pulling up the ship's layout once more. "We need to get to the atrium before Drathor and his men figure out what's happened." He led Ellie out of the control room and back into the corridors, adrenaline fueling their movements. As they approached the atrium, the sounds of shouting and blaster fire echoed ahead. Ethan pushed open the door to the atrium, his heart sinking as he saw the chaos unfolding. Guards were trying to regain control of the situation, but the crowd had turned into a frenzied mob, and the Oran women were now free, moving to escape. "Go, now," Ethan shouted to Ellie, pointing toward the exit on the far side of the room. As they dashed into the fray, Ethan spotted Drathor standing at the center of the chaos, his eyes scanning for the source of the disturbance. The moment their eyes met, a predatory smile spread across his face. "Graves," Drathor shouted, his voice booming over the chaos. "You're a thorn in my side. You should have stayed hidden." Ethan's resolve hardened. "Not today," he growled, positioning himself in front of Ellie as guards began to converge on them. Ellie looked up at him, fear etched on her face. "What do we do?" "Create a diversion," Ethan replied, his mind racing. "Get the others to safety while I hold them off." "I can't leave you," she protested, but Ethan shook his head. "You have to. I'll find a way to catch up. Just go." With a deep breath, Ellie nodded. Okay, be careful. Ethan turned back toward Drathor and the approaching guards, determination surging through him. He would protect Ellie and the Oran women at all costs. As the guards closed in, Ethan raised his blaster, firing off shots to create chaos. This way, he yelled, gesturing to the Oran women who were hesitating at the edge of the room. Follow me. They began to move, their luminous skin glowing brightly even amidst the chaos. The guards hesitated, unsure of how to react to the sudden shift in momentum. Drathor snarled, realizing what was happening. Stop them, he roared, his fury palpable. But Ethan was already moving, firing again and again, each shot ringing out like a battle cry. He was a soldier, and he wouldn't let fear stop him. The atrium erupted into chaos as the Oran women made their way to safety. Ethan could see Ali at the forefront, leading them toward the exit. With a surge of strength, Ethan charged forward, determined to keep the guards at bay long enough for the women to escape. He fired again, hitting one guard square in the chest. "Graves," Drathor shouted, his voice laced with fury. "You'll pay for this." But Ethan didn't care. He was fighting for something greater than himself. He was fighting for freedom. As the guards swarmed, Ethan felt a rush of determination. He wouldn't go down without a fight. "Get out of here," he yelled at the women, and they fled through the exit. He could hear the sounds of their footsteps fading away as he faced the oncoming tide of guards. But the battle was far from over. With every ounce of his training and resolve, Ethan prepared for the fight ahead, ready to take on Drathor and his men. In that moment, as chaos erupted around him, Ethan knew he was fighting not just for his life, but for the freedom of those who had been oppressed for far too long. "Bring it on," he muttered, ready to face whatever came next. The reckoning. The air crackled with tension as Ethan Graves stood amidst the chaos of the atrium, the vibrant colors of alien life flashing before his eyes like a surreal painting in motion. He had given the Oran women their chance for freedom, but now he was left to face the wrath of Drathor and his guards. Ethan could feel the adrenaline surging through him, a familiar fire igniting as he braced himself for the fight ahead. "Graves." Drathor's voice sliced through the chaos, rich with contempt and fury. "You think you can disrupt my auction and escape unscathed? You will pay for this insolence." Ethan clenched his jaw, leveling his blaster at the arms dealer. The room around him was filled with the sounds of panic, guests scattering in every direction as the reality of the situation set in. The Oran women were on the verge of freedom, and he would do everything in his power to protect that. A trio of guards surged forward, weapons drawn, their eyes glinting with malice. Ethan steadied himself, feeling the weight of the blaster in his hand, a familiar comfort amid the uncertainty. He fired again, his aim true, striking the first guard in the shoulder. The alien staggered back with a cry, momentarily halting the advance of the others. "Keep pushing," Drathor shouted, rallying his men with a feral grin. "Don't let him escape." Ethan ducked behind a nearby pillar, the cool metal against his back providing a momentary refuge. He glanced around, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. The atrium was massive, with several exits, but most were likely swarming with guards. He needed to create a diversion, something to shift the tide in his favor. Just then, he spotted a group of frightened guests huddled together near the far end of the room. They were trapped, cornered by guards who seemed more interested in capturing Ethan than ensuring the safety of the innocents. An idea sparked in Ethan's mind. "Hey," he shouted, his voice cutting through the clamor. "If you want to live, follow me." With that, Ethan sprinted toward the group, hoping to inspire courage in their hearts. "This way," he yelled, gesturing toward a service corridor that led to the back of the atrium. The guests hesitated, but fear quickly overcame their uncertainty, and they began to follow him. As they ran, Ethan fired another round, taking down a second guard who had moved to intercept them. The chaos around him grew louder, the guards scrambling to regain control of the situation. Go," Ethan urged, pushing the frightened guests forward. He felt a surge of purpose. He was not just fighting for the Oran women anymore, but for anyone who dared to resist Drathor's tyranny. As they reached the service corridor, Ethan turned to face the guards who had begun to regroup. "We need to barricade the entrance," he shouted to the group, and they scrambled to push a heavy supply crate against the door. "Is this going to hold?" one of the guests asked, panic lacing their voice. "It has to," Ethan replied, catching his breath. "We need time to escape." With the door barricaded, Ethan turned to the terrified group. "Listen up. We need to find a way to signal for help. There's bound to be a comms panel somewhere nearby. If we can get a message out, we might have a chance." One of the guests, a tall, grey-skinned alien with large, expressive eyes, stepped forward. "I know where the comms panel is. Follow me." Ethan nodded, grateful for the ally. "Lead the way." They moved cautiously through the dimly lit service corridors, the sounds of chaos fading into the background. Ethan kept his blaster drawn, eyes alert for any signs of danger. The narrow passageway twisted and turned, and Ethan felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had committed to saving these lives, and he would see it through. After a few minutes of navigating the labyrinthine corridors, they arrived at a small room filled with blinking lights and screens. The comms panel was positioned against one wall, wires snaking out from it like veins. "This is it," the alien exclaimed, rushing to the controls. Ethan kept watch, listening for any signs of pursuit. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the alien began to tap on the panel. "I can send a distress signal," he said, his fingers flying over the controls. "But it will take a few moments to set up." "Make it quick," Ethan urged, glancing back toward the door. The sounds of footsteps echoed faintly, and his heart raced. "We don't have much time." Just then, the door shuddered under the weight of the guards attempting to breach it. The crate groaned, and Ethan gritted his teeth. "How long?" he pressed, his voice low and urgent. "Almost there," the alien replied, sweat beading on his brow. Ethan turned to the door, bracing himself against the crate. "Get ready to move," he called to the others, his heart pounding. He could hear the guards shouting, ordering one another to push harder. "Got it," the alien shouted, hitting a final button, sending the signal now. Just as the distress signal left the ship, the door burst open, and a squad of guards poured into the room. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He swung around, firing at the first guard who entered, striking him square in the chest. "Run," Ethan shouted, urging the guests to escape as he continued to fire. The guards returned fire, blaster bolts ricocheting off the walls. The room filled with smoke and chaos, and Ethan fought to hold his ground. "Get to the exit," he yelled, his voice hoarse with urgency. "Go." The guests scrambled toward the door, taking the opportunity to escape. Ethan fired again, taking down another guard before he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. He gasped, stumbling back as a stun blast hit him. "Ethan," Ellie's voice rang out, and he turned to see her rushing back into the fray, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm okay," he called, but he could feel his strength waning. The world around him began to blur as he fought to remain conscious. "Get out of here. I'll hold them off," he shouted, but Ellie shook her head, her determination unyielding. "No, we're not leaving you." With a burst of energy, she charged forward, tackling one of the guards to the ground. In that moment, Ethan's resolve reignited. He couldn't let her sacrifice herself for him. "Ali, behind you," he shouted, but it was too late. A guard raised his weapon, and without thinking, Ethan lunged forward, shoving Ellie out of the way as the blaster fired. The bolt hit him square in the chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain radiated through his body, but through the haze, he could see Ellie kneeling beside him, panic etched on her face. "Ethan, no," she cried, desperately checking for wounds. Just give me a moment," Ethan gasped, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He could feel the world spinning. but his mind raced with thoughts of the Oran women and the lives still at stake. "You have to go. Get the others to safety," he urged, struggling to sit up. "No, I won't leave you," Ellie insisted, her voice fierce and unwavering. Ethan looked deep into her silver eyes, willing her to understand. "You have to trust me. I'll find a way. Just go." Suddenly, the comms panel lit up, a voice crackling through the chaos. "This is Captain Jorak of the Galactic Alliance. We're responding to a distress signal from the Celestial Dawn. Prepare for boarding." Hope surged within Ethan, invigorating him. "See," he gasped, a weak smile crossing his lips. "Help is coming. You have to be ready." Ellie nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I can't just leave you." "I'll be fine," Ethan insisted, his voice firmer. "You need to go now, while there's still a chance." With a heavy heart, Ellie took one last look at him before bolting toward the exit. Ethan struggled to his feet, leaning against the wall for support. He could hear the guards regrouping, their footsteps approaching fast. With a surge of determination, Ethan pushed through the pain, raising his blaster one last time. "Come on, you bastards," he shouted, ready to face whatever came next. The guards burst into the room, weapons drawn, but before they could react, the sound of blaster fire filled the air. Ethan fired shot after shot, trying to create a barrier for Ellie and the others to escape. Suddenly, a squad of soldiers burst through the door, clad in the uniforms of the Galactic Alliance. "Drop your weapons," one of them shouted, pointing a blaster at the guards. Ethan's heart soared as he saw reinforcements flood the room, the tide finally turning in their favor. The guards hesitated, confusion etched on their faces. With a final burst of energy, Ethan fired at the nearest guard, hitting him squarely in the chest. The soldiers of the Galactic Alliance took advantage of the moment, launching their own attack, and within moments, the room was filled with chaos as the battle erupted. Ethan stumbled back, exhaustion and pain catching up to him as he watched the soldiers engage the remaining guards. Just then, Ellie returned, breathless but alive. "I told you I wouldn't leave you," she said, rushing to his side. Ethan smiled weakly, relief flooding his chest. "You came back," he murmured, gratitude filling his voice. "Of course I did," Ellie replied, glancing around at the chaos unfolding around them. "We need to help them." With renewed vigor, Ethan nodded. Together, they joined the fray, fighting alongside the soldiers of the Galactic Alliance. Blaster fire lit up the atrium as the tide of battle shifted. Ethan felt a surge of hope as he and Ellie fought side by side, their bond growing stronger amidst the chaos. They were no longer just two beings caught in a terrible situation. They were allies, fighting for a common cause. As the guards began to fall back, Drafor's voice rang out over the din, furious and desperate. "You can't do this. You'll regret it." Ethan locked eyes with Drafor, determination hardening in his chest. "No more regrets," he vowed, charging forward alongside the Alliance soldiers. The battle raged on, and for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of victory swelling within him. They were fighting for freedom, for the Oran women who had been subjected to unspeakable horrors. As the last of the guards fell, Ethan and Ellie stood together, breathless but victorious. The atrium was filled with the sounds of triumph, the soldiers of the Galactic Alliance celebrating their hard-fought battle. But amidst the celebration, Ethan knew that their fight was far from over. Drafor was still out there, and his power extended beyond this ship. They needed to find a way to dismantle his operations once and for all. With Ellie by his side and newfound allies in the Galactic Alliance, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would not stop until Drafor was brought to justice, and the Oran women were free to live their lives without fear. "Let's finish this," Ethan said, his voice resolute. Together, they would take on whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their quest for freedom and justice in a galaxy that so desperately needed it. The chase begins. In the aftermath of the battle, the atrium of the Celestial Dawn lay in ruins. a chaotic scene of debris and scattered guests who had fled the chaos. Ethan, alongside Ailey and the soldiers of the Galactic Alliance, stood amid the wreckage, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt electronics and the faint whir of damaged systems struggling to reboot. As the dust began to settle, Ethan looked around, taking stock of the situation. The Galactic Alliance soldiers were regrouping, assessing injuries and securing the perimeter. Their leader, Captain Jorak, strode over to Ethan, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Nice work back there," Jorak said, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "But this isn't over yet. Drathor won't take this lightly." "I know," Ethan replied, scanning the atrium for any signs of Drathor or his remaining forces. "He'll be looking to escape and regroup. We need to move quickly before he slips away." Ellie stepped forward, determination etched on her face. "Where do we start? We can't let him get away after everything he's done." Jorak nodded, turning serious. "We have a few options. The ship's security systems are still partially operational, but we need to access the command center to track Drathor's movements. We can't afford to let him hide or escape." "Then let's go," Ethan said, his mind already racing with the plan. "We need to split up. Some of us should head to the command center, while others search the ship for any signs of Drathor. He has to be somewhere nearby." "Agreed," Jorak said. "We'll need to coordinate our efforts. Let's regroup at the command center in 15 minutes. If you find Drathor, do not engage without backup. We don't know what he has planned." Ethan nodded, his heart racing at the thought of facing Drathor again. "Understood. Allie, are you ready?" "I'm with you, Ethan," she replied, her eyes unwavering. With a plan in place, the group split into smaller teams, each armed and ready for whatever came next. Ethan and Ellie moved swiftly through the corridors of the Celestial Dawn, the ship still buzzing with activity as emergency lights flickered overhead. "We need to find a way to the command center," Ethan said, glancing at the ship's map displayed on a nearby terminal. "It should be on the upper decks." Ailey followed closely, her determination palpable. "What if Drathor has already made it there? We can't let him get access to the ship's systems." "Exactly. We need to secure that room before he can use it to his advantage," Ethan replied. "Let's hurry." They navigated through the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The atmosphere was tense, a palpable sense of danger lurking just beyond every corner. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, and an alarm blared, echoing through the ship. "Ethan, what's happening?" Ellie shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "Sounds like the ship is going into lockdown," Ethan replied, his heart pounding. "We need to move faster. If Drathor triggers a lockdown, it will be nearly impossible to track him." As they rounded a corner, they spotted a group of guards rushing toward the command center, their faces twisted in determination. "This way," Ethan urged, pulling Ellie into a side corridor. They sprinted down the narrow passage, the adrenaline pushing them forward. "Do you think we'll be able to catch him?" Ellie asked, her voice strained as they turned sharply. "We have to," Ethan replied, glancing back to ensure they weren't being followed. "Drathor has resources and connections. If we let him escape, he'll regroup and come back stronger." Ellie nodded, her resolve unshaken. "We can't let that happen. We've already come too far." As they continued deeper into the bowels of the ship, Ethan's mind raced. He had faced enemies before, but Drathor was different, ruthless, cunning, and driven by greed. If they didn't act quickly, there was no telling what he would do next. They reached a door leading to the maintenance shaft that would take them up to the upper decks. Ethan quickly swiped his access card, praying it would work. The door hissed open, and they stepped inside, ascending through the narrow, dimly lit shaft. "Stay alert," Ethan warned, his senses heightened as they climbed. "We could run into Drathor or his men at any moment." Ellie's hand brushed against Ethan's as they squeezed into the cramped space, their shared resolve bolstering each other. "We'll take them down together," she said, a fierce determination in her eyes. As they reached the top of the shaft, Ethan carefully opened the door, peering out into the command center. The room was spacious, filled with screens displaying vital ship systems and security feeds. "Looks clear," Ethan whispered, stepping out into the command center. They moved quickly, Ellie heading to one of the terminals while Ethan checked the doors, ensuring they were secure. "Can you access the security feeds?" he asked, glancing back at her. "Give me a moment," Ellie replied, fingers flying over the screen. "I'll see if I can track Drathor's movements." Ethan nodded, his heart racing as he scanned the room for any signs of danger. The tension was thick, and the possibility of Drathor appearing at any moment loomed large in his mind. Suddenly, a monitor flickered to life, revealing a view of the atrium where chaos still reigned. Guests were fleeing, and the Galactic Alliance soldiers were continuing their search. "There," Ellie exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "I think I see him." Ethan leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat as he recognized Drathor's distinctive crimson scales amid the crowd. The arms dealer was moving toward an exit, flanked by a pair of guards. "We have to go after him," Ethan said, urgency flooding his veins. "If he escapes, he'll regroup, and we'll lose our chance to take him down." "Right," Ellie said, determination shining in her eyes. "But we need to be careful. He'll have security waiting for him." "We'll split up," Ethan suggested. "You stay here and monitor the feeds. If he changes direction, let me know. I'll go after him." "No way. I'm coming with you," Ellie insisted, her voice firm. "Don't argue with me, Ellie," Ethan replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "You'll be safer here." "I can handle myself," she shot back, her expression resolute. "I won't let you go alone." Ethan sighed, realizing there was no swaying her. "All right, but stay close. We need to work together." They moved swiftly through the command center, heading toward the nearest exit. The plan was simple: catch Drathor before he could escape and prevent him from regrouping. As they approached the exit, Ethan paused, holding his hand up. "Wait," he whispered. He listened intently, straining to hear any sounds of guards nearby. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel his heart racing. "Do you hear that?" Ellie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, hearing faint voices just beyond the door. "It sounds like they're planning a counter-offensive," he said, brow furrowing. "We need to move before they realize we're here." With a quick nod, Ethan opened the door, glancing into the corridor. The coast was clear. "Let's go," he said, stepping out into the hallway. They moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled against the metal floor. The ship's interior was alive with activity as soldiers rushed to and fro, responding to the chaos. Ethan led the way, his instincts guiding him as they navigated through the complex. After several twists and turns, they approached a large observation window overlooking the docking bay. Ethan peered through the glass, scanning for any sign of Drathor. "There," Ellie whispered, pointing to a sleek ship preparing for launch, its engines humming ominously. Ethan's heart sank. If he gets off that ship, we may never find him again. We have to stop him. They raced toward the docking bay, urgency fueling their movements. As they approached, Ethan spotted a pair of guards stationed near the ship, their expressions grim. "Cover me," he whispered to Ellie, raising his blaster. "I'll distract them while you flank from the side." "Got it," Ellie replied, determination etched on her features. Ethan stepped out into the open, raising his weapon. "Hey, over here," he shouted, drawing the guards' attention. The guards turned, surprise flashing across their faces. "What the?" one began, but Ethan didn't give them a chance to react. He fired, striking one guard in the shoulder. "Now," he yelled, signaling to Ellie. She darted to the side, moving quickly to flank the remaining guard. The two engaged in a brief but intense struggle, blast of fire lighting up the docking bay. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline as he took down the first guard, but the second one quickly caught up to Ellie, closing in. "Watch out," he shouted, moving to assist. But just as he lunged, a sharp pain erupted in his side. A stun blast hit him squarely, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Ali," he cried out, struggling to regain his footing. "Ethan," she shouted, her voice filled with panic. With a fierce determination, Ailey fought against the guard, managing to knock him off balance. She spun around, eyes blazing as she rushed to Ethan's side. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her features. "I'll be fine," Ethan grunted, pushing himself up. "We need to move." With newfound urgency, they pushed forward, their hearts racing as they reached the ship's entrance. The engines roared to life, and Drathor was already preparing for takeoff. "Stop him," Ethan shouted, raising his blaster again. But before he could fire, Drathor turned, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You're too late, Graves," he taunted, a smug smile spreading across his face. "You think you can stop me? I'll make sure you regret ever stepping foot on my ship." With that, he hit a button on the control panel, and the docking bay doors began to close. "No," Ethan shouted, his heart racing as he sprinted forward, desperately trying to reach his ship before it escaped. But it was too late. The doors sealed shut, the sleek vessel taking off into the depths of space. Ethan's heart sank as he watched it disappear, the realization of their failure hitting him like a cold wave. "Ethan, we need to regroup," Ellie urged, pulling him back. "We can't let him get away." Ethan felt frustration boiling within him. They had come so close, only to see Drathor slip through their fingers. "We'll find him," he vowed, determination hardening his resolve. "We just need to regroup and plan our next move." "Agreed," Ellie said, her expression fierce. "We can't let him go unpunished for what he's done." As they turned to leave the docking bay, Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of the battle ahead. Drathor may have escaped for now, but they would track him down. They had come too far to turn back now, and he wouldn't let the arms dealer's cruelty continue unchecked. Together, they would uncover Drathor's plans, gather allies, and bring him to justice. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their mission settle over him. This was only the beginning, and he would fight to the very end. Gathering allies. As Ethan and Ellie exited the docking bay, the urgency of their mission fueled their determination. They navigated the winding corridors of the Celestial Dawn, passing by injured guests and soldiers tending to their wounds. The air buzzed with a mixture of chaos and adrenaline, a stark reminder of the battle that had just unfolded. "Where do we go from here?" Ellie asked, glancing at Ethan as they pressed onward. "We need to regroup with Captain Jorak and the other Alliance soldiers," Ethan replied, his mind racing. "They'll know how to strategize our next move against Drathor. We have to find out where he's headed and stop him before he can do any more damage." They rounded a corner and entered a small briefing room where several Galactic Alliance soldiers were gathered, their expressions a mix of relief and concern. Captain Jorak stood at the head of the table, poring over a holographic display of the ship's layout. "Ethan, Ali, you're back," Jorak exclaimed, relief washing over his features. "We feared the worst after you went after Drathor." "We almost had him," Ethan replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "But he escaped in his ship. We need to track him down before he can regroup." Jorak nodded, his expression serious. "We're analyzing the security feeds to see if we can pinpoint his destination. For now, let's gather what we know." Ethan stepped closer to the display, his gaze fixed on the hologram. "If we can find out where Drathor is headed, we might be able to intercept him. He won't be able to hide for long." Ali chimed in, her eyes bright with determination. "We should also reach out to other ships in the area. The Galactic Alliance has resources. We can call for backup." "Good thinking," Jorak said, tapping a few commands on the control panel. "I'll send a message to our nearby fleets, but we need to be cautious. Drathor has connections, and he might have allies on the lookout for us. Ethan's mind churned as he reviewed the ship's layout, his eyes scanning for any potential advantages. What about the cargo bay? Drathor may have stored some of his illicit goods there. If we can secure those, it might give us leverage. Jorak nodded in agreement. We can send a team to check it out while we monitor the ship's systems. We'll need to be swift and efficient. Let's move, Ethan urged, adrenaline pumping through him. The longer we wait, the more time Drathor has to plot his next move. The soldiers quickly organized themselves, preparing to split into teams. Ethan and Ellie were assigned to the group headed for the cargo bay, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As they made their way through the corridors, the atmosphere was charged with purpose. Ethan glanced at Ellie, who walked beside him, her expression a mix of determination and concern. "What do you think Drathor's next move will be?" she asked, her voice steady. "Given what we've seen, he'll likely try to gather more resources or allies," Ethan replied. "He's not the type to go down without a fight. If he has a chance to bolster his forces, he'll take it." They reached the cargo bay, a large door standing before them, reinforced and secured. Ethan activated the access panel, and the door hissed open, revealing a cavernous space filled with crates and containers stacked high. "Stay alert," he said, stepping inside. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." The team moved cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Ethan led the way, his senses heightened, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As they navigated through the maze of crates, a sound caught his attention. He paused, signaling for the team to halt. "Did you hear that?" Ellie nodded, her eyes narrowing as she strained to listen. "It sounds like voices." Ethan's heart raced as they moved closer to the source. They crept around a stack of crates and spotted a group of aliens gathered in a corner, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Those are Drathor's men," one of the soldiers whispered, his voice filled with urgency. "What do we do?" Ethan thought quickly, feeling the adrenaline surge. "We need to find out what they're planning. We can't confront them head-on. It would alert Drathor." "Agreed," Ellie said, her expression determined. "We can listen in and gather intel. If they're planning something, we need to know what it is." They positioned themselves behind a nearby crate, straining to hear the conversation. The group of aliens, a mix of various species, huddled close together, whispering urgently. "Drathor is furious about the auction," one of them said, his voice low and tense. "He's calling for reinforcements. We need to be ready. We can't let those galactic fools stop us. If we can get to the Auran women before they regroup, we can turn this around," another replied. Ethan exchanged a glance with Ellie, a mix of anger and determination brewing within him. "They're planning to strike again. We can't let that happen." "Let's gather more intel," Ellie whispered, leaning closer. "We need to find out where they're headed next." Just then, one of the aliens glanced up, scanning the cargo bay as if sensing their presence. "We need to move quickly. Drathor will not tolerate failure." Ethan's heart raced as he realized they needed to act fast. "We can't let them escape," he whispered. "We need to take them out before they can warn Drathor." With a nod of agreement, Ethan signaled to the team. "On my mark, we move in. Take them by surprise." They prepared for the ambush, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they readied their weapons. 3, 2, 1, now. Ethan surged forward, leading the charge as they overwhelmed the group of aliens. Blaster fire erupted, and chaos ensued as the surprised conspirators scrambled to defend themselves. Ethan fought fiercely, focused on taking down the threats. He could feel the adrenaline surge as he engaged in close combat, grappling with one of the aliens and taking him down with a swift strike. Ellie was right beside him, her determination shining as she dispatched another conspirator with precision. "We've got this," she shouted, firing her blaster with accuracy. The cargo bay erupted into chaos as the team fought to secure the area. Ethan felt the thrill of battle coursing through him, but the weight of their mission pressed heavily on his mind. Within moments, the last of the conspirators lay defeated, the air thick with the smell of blaster fire and smoke. Breathing heavily, Ethan surveyed the scene, his heart racing as he took stock of their success. "We did it," Ellie said, a fierce smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Yeah, but we can't celebrate just yet," Ethan replied, scanning the area. "We need to find out what they were planning. There might be intel here that can help us track Thor." They searched the area, rifling through the crates and containers. After a few tense moments, Ellie called out, "Ethan, over here." Ethan rushed to her side as she pointed to a small console attached to one of the crates. "It looks like it's connected to their communication systems. We might be able to access their messages." With urgency, Ethan activated the console, watching as the screen flickered to life. Come on," he muttered, fingers flying over the controls as he navigated through the encrypted files. Finally, a message popped up on the screen, detailing a plan for Thor to relocate his operations to a hidden facility on a nearby planet. "There it is," Ethan exclaimed, excitement surging within him. "We've got a lead." "Can we get the coordinates?" Ellie asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. Ethan continued typing, feeling the weight of the moment. "Yes, I'm downloading the location now." As the coordinates transferred, a sudden alarm blared throughout the cargo bay, jolting them from their focus. "Ethan, we need to go," Ellie shouted, her voice urgent as she grabbed his arm. "Got it," he said, quickly securing the information before they turned to leave. "Which way?" one of the soldiers asked, glancing around as panic surged in the air. "Back the way we came," Ethan ordered, leading the group toward the exit. They sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline pushing them forward as the alarms echoed behind them. As they approached the main hallway, Ethan spotted a squad of guards moving toward them, their expressions filled with intent. "We need to fight our way out," he shouted, raising his blaster. The soldiers fell into formation, prepared for the confrontation. "Stay sharp," Jorek commanded, positioning himself at the front. With a surge of energy, Ethan charged forward alongside the team, blaster fire illuminating the corridor. They engaged the guards in a fierce battle, blaster bolts ricocheting off the walls as the clash of wills erupted around them. "Keep moving," Ethan shouted, urging everyone forward. "We can't let them cut us off." Ellie fought valiantly by his side, her determination shining through the chaos. "We're almost there," she called out, her voice a beacon of hope amid the turmoil. With every shot fired, Ethan felt the weight of their mission pushing him onward. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for all the lives impacted by Thor's cruel machinations. Finally, they reached a secured exit, and Ethan activated the door. "Hurry," he shouted, ushering everyone through. As they emerged into the main deck, the air felt charged with a mix of urgency and hope. They had fought hard, and now they had the coordinates they needed to confront Thor once and for all. "Let's regroup and plan our next move," Jorek said, his voice steady amid the chaos. "We need to get to the planet before Thor can strengthen his position." Ethan nodded, determination flooding his veins. "We'll get there first. We can't let him escape again." As they moved swiftly toward the command center, Ethan felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him. This battle was far from over, but with allies like Ellie and the Galactic Alliance by his side, they stood a chance against the darkness that Thor represented. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their quest for justice and freedom.